There was a young man that came up to his granddaddy as he was sitting on the porch swing reading his Bible. The little boy said, "Granddaddy, what are you doing?" Granddaddy said, "I guess you might say, I'm studying for my final exam." And that's really a good way to look at why we read the Bible. We want to know the mind of God. As I mentioned in the message this morning, that young lady was suddenly enamored with reading the Word of God, or reading the book, I should say, in the illustration, once she realized that the author was someone that she knew and loved, and that likewise, that will make us want to study the Word of God when we know the author, when we love the author. But what is it that we're going to be tested over? You know, my students at the School of Preaching are forevermore wanting to know when test time is arriving. Brother Clarke, what's going to be on the test? They want to know the material over which they'll be tested. On the day of judgment, are there some questions that you and I can know the answer to ahead of time that will prepare us for that final exam? You and I may think that we've taken the last examination we'll ever take. But the truth is, according to Romans 14 and verse 12, each one of us shall give account of himself to God. I want to be ready. 31,102 verses in the King James Version of the Bible, 1,189 chapters. How do you break that massive amount of material down into something more manageable? I want to suggest to you this evening that if you and I know the answer to these questions, 4 questions, we'll be ready. We'll be ready for the judgment day if we know the answer to these questions. Number 1, where did I come from? Number 2, what am I doing here? Number 3, where am I going? And number 4, and very closely related, how do I get there? Now, these questions are not the first time that you've ever heard them addressed from a pulpit. I realize that. I heard my daddy preach on these very issues, and I preached on them many times, and you'll hear more sermons like them over the years. But number 1 question, where did I come from? Why is that where we begin? Because if I don't believe that God is real and that God is the author of this universe, then I'm not going to really have any divine purpose for why I'm here or where I'm going or how to get there. This book will matter little to me if I don't believe in God. Now let me ask you a question. Where did I come from? The only possible answers are, I came from God or I didn't. Now either this world is accidentally evolved or it blew up into existence, or it has a maker. I want you to stop and think about this. In the Bible, in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. You know how amazing the Bible is? Some years ago, it was in the 1700s, I believe, there was this scientist by the name of Spencer. And he was hailed as having discovered something absolutely amazing. He was able to boil down the 5 components of life and say it's all about the following: time, force, energy, space, and matter. That's the essence of life. Time and force and energy and space and matter. And then someone happened to observe that Moses, writing about 3,500 years before Spencer made this discovery, Moses wrote in the very first verse of the Bible, in the beginning. What's that, my friend? That's time. In the beginning, God. What's that? That's force. Created, what is that? That's energy. The heavens, what is that? That's space. And the earth, what is that? That's matter. In the very first verse of the Holy Bible, all of the essence of life is found and combined in one passage. I know that there is a God in heaven, but you know, someone may not believe the Bible. Can I convince someone that does not believe the Bible that there is a God in heaven? I know the heavens declare the glory of God and the firmament shows His handiwork, Psalm 19:1. But there's another passage of Scripture I'd like to draw your attention to that the principle of can be used to show someone there is a God. Even before they believe the Bible, you can convince them that there has to be a Creator because of this reason. Listen to Hebrews 3:4. For every house is builded by some man, but he that built all things is God. Now, I don't know how long this building has been standing in this spot. I wasn't here when it was built, But I'm going to tell you this. We could bring the world's most renowned atheist into this very structure. And we could say, sir, we want you to look around, look at everything you see, and tell us, did this building have a designer and a builder and a maker, or did it just kind of blow up into existence by accidental chance and happenstance? The world's most renowned atheist is going to look at this building and he's going to see the evidence of purpose and design. You see this camera that appears to be pointing directly at me? It's almost as if someone did that on purpose. And I would never be able to convince the atheist that that camera with its eyesight had the fortunate happenstance to just blow up into existence and land in such a fashion that it created itself, so to speak, by virtue of a Big Bang explosion and just happened to be pointing in the right direction and mounted itself. And these PowerPoint projectors that are pointing seemingly very deliberately at these walls. It's almost as if someone did that on purpose. And of course, they did do it on purpose. But the human beings who pointed them at these walls were told had no designer, no builder, no maker. It's all accidental chance and happenstance. I'm amazed at what you can get man to believe if you call it science. Now, my wife's been a science teacher, and I'm truly interested in true science. But I want you to know that those who claim to be scientific are often the very opposite. The word science means to know. That's the very essence of the word. And these individuals say that they know that this world just kind of came into existence by accidental chance and happenstance. Now, what kind of sense does that make? Young people, I want you to picture something with me. Just imagine it for a moment. You come in from where you're going tomorrow, and there on the counter is your favorite cake, your very favorite cake. It's baked and iced with your favorite frosting, and it has your name written across the face of it. You track down your mom and you thank her profusely for baking your favorite cake. And your mom says, darling, I love you, but I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't bake you a cake. Now, in my family, I can promise you this. If I told my children daddy didn't bake it, or mama didn't bake it, if mama told the children, I should say, that she didn't bake the cake, they would not search me out to see if maybe I did it. They'd know better. They'd know that's not a realistic explanation for the origin of the cake. But there are some men in this congregation, I'm quite sure, that are pretty proficient in the kitchen. Some of you may have even prepared some of the good food we had earlier today. And so you track your father down. You say, Dad, thank you for baking me my favorite cake. Your dad says, honey, I love you dearly, but I didn't bake you a cake. And your mom didn't do it. Your dad didn't do it. Do your brother and sister love you enough to bake you a cake? Maybe. Maybe not. Some of you are shaking your head saying, no, there's no way my brother or sister would bake me a cake just out of the clear blue sky. Well, Dad gets a family meeting together later that night and says, you know, I've been thinking this thing through and I figured it out. It's as plain as day what must have happened. I heard on the radio today that there were some earthquakes in the vicinity surrounding our neighborhood. It's as plain as day what must have happened. The earth must have been quaking and shaking to the point that it shook our house. And as it was shaking our house, a mixing bowl started working its way out of the cupboard. And it just so happened to be shaken violently enough that the mixing bowl left the cupboard and landed on the kitchen counter. At some point in time, there must have been such a violent quake or shake that maybe even a gas main somewhere burst, and it caused an explosion that rocked our house and sent the refrigerator door flying open, and eggs started hurtling out of the refrigerator. And of all the places in the entire kitchen those eggs could have gone, fortunately for us, they just so happened to smash right above the mixing bowl and drip down into the mixing bowl. Wasn't that a fortunate accident for us? Somehow all the ingredients necessary for the baking of a cake collided in midair, landed in the mixing bowl, and as the earth's quaking and shaking, the mixing bowl's mixing up its contents. Now everyone knows that a mixing bowl sitting on the kitchen counter is a nice start, but that doesn't bake a cake. We need to get the cake into a cake pan and then into the oven. How are we going to do that? It's not a problem. Anytime you can't figure out how something must have happened, kaboom, a big bang will explain it all. There was an explosion, you see. And a cake pan came flying out of the oven. The mixing bowl collided with the cake pan. Now the cake pan's on the kitchen floor. Mixing bowl is upside down, emptying its contents into the cake pan, and now we're getting somewhere. Daddy, cakes don't bake themselves sitting on the kitchen floor in a cake pan with the mixing bowl right smack dab in the middle of the pan. I know, children, there's an explanation. Do you know what it is? Kaboom, a big bang. There was an explosion, at which time the cake pan separates from the mixing bowl. The cake pan's levitating right about the level where the oven door is. Oven door is rocked open by an explosion, and the cake pan goes throttling in. Now we're really getting somewhere. Daddy, who turned on the oven? Children, there was an explosion. It knocked a mason jar out of its cupboard, and it started falling toward the floor. And as it fell toward the floor, it bumped into the knob that turned it to the bake setting. How fortunate. And there was another mason jar. As it was falling toward the floor, it bumped into the temperature knob, and fortunately for us, bumped it to just the exact right temperature needed for baking a cake. Daddy, who took the cake out of the oven? When the cake was just as moist and just as right as it could be as far as the baking of a cake is concerned, kaboom, there was an explosion. The refrigerator door flies open. The frosting has the top pop off of it and somehow hurtles through the air, smashes and collides with the cake, smothers it with frosting, somehow writes your name across the face of it, and lands on the kitchen counter. And that's how it got here, boys and girls. Everyone knows that. Mama, do you want to call 911, or should one of us kids call 911? Because Daddy has lost his mind. That's the silliest explanation I've ever heard for baking a cake. Who in the world would believe the explanation I just gave for how the cake came to be? Everyone knows Grandma brought it over, right? There's an explanation for where it came from. Grandma did it. Now, I'd like to know who cleaned up the mess, right? If a cake came about in that kind of fashion, there'd be a massive, massive cleanup needed. You know what? It's a lot simpler to just believe that if a cake had to have a baker, man had to have a maker, right? Cakes don't bake themselves, and man didn't make himself. In the beginning, God created. And Genesis 1:26 says, He says, let's make man in our image. I believe that, and I'm not ashamed to believe it. Carl Sagan is no longer in doubt about the existence of God. And I do not say that to be funny. I really don't find it funny to think of any man possibly being lost. But the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. And Carl Sagan did not come to grips with the reality of the existence of God and the plan of salvation. Before he passed from this earth, he kept giving ideas that might lead one to believe there really isn't a God out there anyway. He wrote an article for Parade. Does Parade magazine still come with a Sunday paper or not? I don't know if it does or not, but years ago, when I got the Sunday paper, there was a Parade magazine article authored by Carl Sagan. This was fascinating to me. You know what his assignment was? You're in outer space. You're in a spaceship. You've never visited the planet Earth, but you do have satellite technology and infrared technology. Can you, from outer space, never having visited the Earth, can you deduce whether there's intelligent life on Earth? That's his assignment in the article. So guess what he does? He puts an insert photograph taken from outer space, satellite photography of the Washington, D.C. highway system, taken at night, but you can see the traffic lights, and you can see the car lights, the lights of the automobiles. And he says the intricate design and the symmetry of the roads would lead one, even if they'd never visited the earth, to conclude that there was intelligent life on earth because of the organization of the highway system. I don't disagree with him, but I find it fascinating that the same man that could reason to that conclusion could not also see that the human beings who built that highway system also had to have someone design them. Someone made those human beings. And you know, I visited the St. Louis Science Center some years ago with one of the elders of the church where I used to preach. And we found the Science Center to be a fascinating exhibit, but I was really troubled by all of these evolutionary promotions that were going on. Now, I know that God made it possible for there to be change within a species, and change has taken place over time within a species, but no, you don't find what the evolutionists have to have for evolution to be true, and that is this. I'm not making this up. I wish I were, but this is what they actually teach. You know where whales came from anyway? Do you know where whales came from? One day, a cow decided, I'm sick of being here on the land. I'd like to know what it's like out there in the water. And the cow wandered out in the water, she did, and she didn't make it very long before she drowned. Another cow, more fit to survive the water than this cow, went and survived longer but still drowned. Eventually, there was a cow strong enough and fit enough to survive the water long enough to develop a breathing mechanism and apparatus so that this cow was able to stay out of the water, live out of the water, and she just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until she finally became a whale. Everyone knows that's how it happened. There are people with long flowing white laboratory coats that will look you straight in the face with not a trace of a smile on their face and tell you dead serious. They won't tell you the way I just told you because that sounds too fairy tale like. But they'll act like, oh, it's scientifically proven. You say, well, how do you know that evolution is true? Well, because of the fossils. Well, how do you know the fossils are really the age that they are, that you claim they are? Well, because of the sediment that we found the fossils in. Okay, well, how do you know that the sediment you found the fossils in is as old as you say it is? Well, because of the fossils and their age. Okay, slow down for me, please. You know the fossils are the age they are because of the dirt you found them in. That's right. And you know the dirt you found them in is as old as it is. Why? Because of how old the fossils are. It's circular reasoning. This is the way they try to reason with us. And you know what's sad to me? As long as they call themselves scientists and claim that they know what they're talking about, there are some folks who will buy into it and say, we've got to find some way to make the Bible fit this. You know, I first of all want to tell you what you already know, and that is that some of these folks are so completely trusting of the dating methods when the dating methods are not reliable. Listen, same strata they claim is millions and millions and millions of years old. Guess what they found in it? Same sediment, same strata of rock and dirt. Fishing rod and reel. Yeah. I don't think fishing rods and reels go back millions of years, do you? Now, I'm going to tell you what, though, and this is what used to absolutely throw people, but you know, if you stop and think about this, it shouldn't throw you at all. Someone says, well, we know that the earth is billions and billions and billions of years old. How do you know that? Well, science has proven it. No, science has claimed it. But you know, there's a difference between the appearance of age and actual age, right? Before Dick Clarke did die, right? I don't want to use this illustration if he's still alive. I think he finally did pass away. But for years, everyone said, look at that man. How old is he? Well, he's a lot older than he looks. He's not actually as young as he appears to be. But you know, that can work in reverse as well. I want you to consider this for just a moment, because so many people have felt like they had to bow at the altar of so-called science that they've got to find a way to inject days that are really millions of years in length into the Genesis record. we've got to make the days of Genesis 1 millions and millions and millions and millions of years. If we don't, then we look like fools before the scientific community. Okay, well, wait a minute. Let's take that argument at its face value, and let's just, for the sake of argument, say that the days of Genesis 1 were really millions and millions and millions and millions of years, not days as we think of days. If that's true, then would you please help me explain Genesis 1:14? In Genesis 1:14, God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days." Now remember, days doesn't mean days. It means multiplied millions and millions and millions and millions of years. Then pray tell, what would the next two words in Genesis 1:14 equal? And years. If days in Genesis 1 equals millions of years, pray tell, what would years equal? Or maybe, I've got a better idea. Maybe we ought to let days be days and years be years, just as God wrote it, and not feel compelled to try to manufacture something that's not there. Let me ask you a question anyway. Does your God, the God you worship and believe in, does He have enough power to make the world in 6 minutes flat? If He wants to, could He do it in 6 minutes flat? Yes or no? Could your God do it in 6 minutes flat? Tell me. Yeah. Why didn't He? You know, when I came home last August into our home and I heard running water, and I knew I shouldn't be hearing running water, and I came around the corner and there's a gaping hole in our living room ceiling and water everywhere. The water heater in the attic had burst while we were gone during the day. Fortunately, we weren't on vacation when it happened. Some of you may have had that experience. But we had a mess just from one day of this water running and gushing. And there are rooms flooded, multiple rooms flooded. There's furniture that will now have to be replaced. This carpet can't be, it's bad. So all these contractors are coming in. They're telling me, here's how long it will take us to repair this. Here's how much time we need to get the job done. Now, God didn't have to have 6 24-hour days to make the world in a 7th day to stop His creative activity. So let me ask you, why did God do it over 6 24-hour days? Because it took that long to make a universe? No. So that you and I would have a time frame in which to live our lives. And by the way, if the days are millions of years in length, He made man on the 6th day. He rested on the 7th day. Adam's alive on the 8th day. But wait a minute, if the days are millions of years old, then Adam, made on the 6th day, would be millions and millions of years old by the time we even get to the 8th day. That doesn't make any sense. And besides, Exodus 20 and verse 11 says, "For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is." You really believe that, preacher? I absolutely believe it. But I'm telling you, God didn't need 6 days. He could have done it faster than that if He'd wanted to. But you know, here's the question that I want you to stop and think about. When God made Adam, did He create him as a helpless little baby who needed a mama to nurse him to adulthood? Or did God create Adam full grown and ready for operation on day one? Yes or no? According to the Bible, did God create Adam as a full grown mature human being ready to go from day one? Or was he a helpless little baby that had to have mama there? He starts off as a grown man. Now, what age exactly, we're not told, but he was grown enough to be able to dress the garden and to keep it and this, that, and the other. He's an historical character. He's real. He really did live. And the Bible affirms such. Jesus acknowledged him as historical, and Eve was an historical character. They're real. Now, let me ask you a question. 5 months after God made Adam, 5 months after God made Adam, technically, literally, how old was Adam 5 months after he first made the scene, after he first came onto the planet? He was 5 months old, right? Have you ever seen a 5-month-old look like Adam looked 5 months after he came to the earth? Huh? He was technically 5 months old, literally 5 months. How old did he look? Did he look 5 months old? He looked a lot older than 5 months old. You've never seen a 5-month-old look like this 5-month-old did. The point is obvious. If God could create Adam with the appearance of age, but not actual age, could He not have done that with the universe as well? That's what He did do. He made the earth mature and full-grown, ready for operation on day one. That's why they can say whatever they want about how old it appears to be, and I'm only going to counter by saying, you know what, they may look that old, but it's not actually as old as it looks, any more than Adam was actually as old as he looked either. So where did I come from? I came from God. He did make this world. He made man. Now what am I doing here? Why did God put me here anyway? Why did God put man here anyway? I want you to go with me to Ecclesiastes chapter 2, and I want to show you that we're not the first people to ever grapple with that question. In the book of Ecclesiastes, look at chapter 2. Solomon, have you ever tried to figure out what this life's all about? Yes, I have. What did you conclude? Well, let me tell you about my journey. I was wise and I had all this earthly wisdom, and I had all this wisdom that had been given to me by God. But you know, I said in mine heart, chapter 2:1 of Ecclesiastes, and that's where Solomon made his first mistake. The same man that said, Proverbs 3:5, trust in the Lord with all your heart, didn't always do that himself. He said in his heart, he looked into his own heart, and he said, now here's my number one bottom line, I will prove thee with mirth, enjoy pleasure. My whole life's going to be about pleasing myself. I'm going to be seeking pleasurable moments. That's what my whole life's going to be. All right, Solomon, how'd that work for you? You set about to just seek everything that was pleasurable. How's that working for you? Look at verse 1. Behold, this also is vanity. It's emptiness. I grab the wind. I think I've got something. I open my hand. There's nothing. It's all emptiness. Solomon, what did you try? Could you be more specific? Look at verse 2. I said of laughter, Ecclesiastes 2:2, it is mad. It's of mirth, what good does it do? You say, I want to laugh my way through life. It's all right to laugh. I love to laugh. But you know what? You can laugh your way through life, and you can laugh at the sermons and how serious the preacher is and think that he's just trying to scare us and all. You can laugh it all off. You can laugh it all off. And yet the truth remains, there is going to be an end to your life. There is going to be an end to this world. And suddenly you'll wish, if you've laughed away your life, that you'd paid more attention to the serious stuff that matters. Solomon, did you ever drink alcohol? Yes. Did you think that would make you happy? Yes. Verse 3, I sought in mine heart to give myself to wine. Now, I didn't want to become someone that was a falling down drunk that didn't know what he was doing. I wanted to yet acquaint my heart with wisdom. I thought I could drink responsibly and find fulfillment. Solomon, how'd that work for you? I was looking for something more. So I tried to become a workaholic. Verse 4, I made me great works. Solomon had houses. How many do you have? Most of us have one. Some of you may have more than one. Nothing inherently sinful in having more than one if you're able to do so. But Solomon had houses in the plural. You could very easily see him on lifestyles of the rich and the famous. I mean, he had all kinds of houses and landscaped property. Verse 5, gardens, orchards, vineyards, trees, pools of water to water the wood. And verse 7, he had servants and maids. Wouldn't you like to have some servants? Would you finally have arrived if you could ever make enough money to live in the biggest mansion in town and to have someone do whatever you told them to do the moment you wanted it done? Cook my dinner, wash my clothes, clean my house. Oh, someone says if I could ever get to that point, I'd finally be happy. Solomon says, I was at that point and I was miserable. You say, I would sure like to try it. Solomon, did you have any money? Verse 8, I gathered silver and gold. Now in verse 7 he said, I had great possessions of great and small cattle above all that were in Jerusalem before me. He had some livestock. Oh, I'm telling you, he had some livestock. I heard about a preacher that went to visit this family before the evening service, and he ate at their home. The farmer in the family said after dinner, I want you to come out, preacher, with me and look at my property. He said, okay. And they went out on the farmer's land, and the farmer said, you see, as far as your eyes can look in that direction, I own all of that. That's my property. Well, that's good. And if you'll turn back around this way, as far as your eyes can see in this direction, that's all my land. And as far as you look in that direction, that's mine too. I own all of that. And the preacher commended him, but he did say, I do have to ask you, he said, as great as that is, he says, how much do you own in that direction? Because that's what it's all about, young people. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon the earth. Those can be stolen from you. You put them up in heaven, your treasures, and man can't get to them. Doesn't matter what the stock market does when your treasures are in heaven, they're safe. Doesn't matter whether thieves break through and steal your earthly stuff, they take your car, your heavenly treasures are safe. Solomon, you had some money. Yeah, how much money did you have? Well, let me put it this way. Verse 9, he said, I was great. I increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. And verse 10, whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I bought anything I wanted. My mom watches these shopping channels. She's really into it. One day I was visiting with her. She said, where's Judy? And I said, who is Judy? The QVC lady. She's gone. She must be on vacation. I miss her. Mom, wow. You know them by their first names. Wow, okay. All right, that's fine. That's fine. You know what? My mom watches, but she makes a few purchases. There are items I know she sees on there she wants. She doesn't buy them. Why? She can't afford it. Guys, you remember when you bought your first car? There's the car you'd like to buy, and there's the car you have to buy, right? Usually that's the case for your first car. The car that you buy, I really wanted that one. Why didn't you buy that? I couldn't afford it. What if you could? If you could afford any car you wanted, would you be happy? Would you finally find peace and fulfillment in your life? You say, I'd sure like to try it. Solomon says, let me tell you something. I had money, and I had a lot of stuff, but it didn't do me any permanent good. I was still miserable. Now, you know, Steve Jobs, the founder of the Apple Corporation, he had an empire. And notice I said had. All of the iPads and iPods and iPhones and I this and I that. And I have some of those. I'm not saying they're inherently wrong to possess, but I want to ask you a question. When Steve Jobs died, how much of his billion-dollar empire did he take with him? How much? Please tell me. Have you ever seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul? Why not? Because 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 7, we brought nothing into this world. It is certain we can carry nothing out. I live 25 miles from the casinos in Mississippi. They tried to bring them into our county 3 times. We fought against it, and 3 times we defeated the amendment to try to get them into our county. So they moved 1 county down and brought them to Tunica. I read a story about a man that was a very dignified businessman. And if you'd seen him during the week in his business suit, you would have thought, that is a very dignified man. I'm telling you, he looks distinguished. This man developed a gambling problem. He went to the local casino, and he lost every bit of money he took with him. And he came out, and he was very depressed. And then he saw someone pull in, and he thought to himself, you know what, I'm going to do something, but it'll work out. He sold his almost brand new SUV for $3,000 cash. Because in his mind, if I get me a little seed money, I'm going to march right back in that casino. I'll get money back enough to buy me a brand new SUV and then some. That's what he thought. He marched right back into the casino. lost every dime of the 3,000 that he just gained. And now he's got a real problem on top of a problem. His wife's going to want to know where the car went. Dignified businessman. He walks out, walks up when he thinks no one is looking. He's not dressed in his business suit now. No one will know. But this is hard for me to imagine. It really happened. He walks up to a telephone pole. And this is one of those old wooden type telephone poles that was still in existence. And when he thought no one was watching, he deliberately took his head and cocked it back and slammed his head purposefully into that telephone pole to make his face mangled and bleeding. And then he got on his cell phone and called his wife and said, "Honey, I've been carjacked and they beat me up and they made me take money out of our account and brought me to this casino and I don't know where they are now and they stole the car." And she believed him. And tell me what he thought this life was all about. I got to get me some stuff. And then I got to get me some more stuff. And when that's not enough, I got to get me some more. And I'm going to keep on accumulating stuff until I've got so much stuff I can't fit it all in my house. I'll have to rent a storage facility to put the stuff in there that I can't fit in my house. So that when the day of judgment comes, all of it can burn. Now think about this with me, friend. 2 Peter chapter 3 says, "Seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in all holy conversation and godliness?" I'm going to leave this earth someday. Why should I put all my focus on stuff that I can't take with me? It's not wrong to have certain items that we need to live and survive, and it's not wrong to even enjoy certain things that are connected to this earth. But I want to tell you something, my friends, as we close out this message tonight. You and I would do well to take a lesson from those who've been there and done that. I preached a sermon some years ago in South Haven, Mississippi. I told about Elvis Presley being interviewed by a rock and roll magazine reporter, and the reporter heard Elvis say, "Sometimes I believe I'm the most miserable man on earth." And the reporter's like, "Okay, whoa, wait a minute. You're miserable." Yeah. Elvis Presley, miserable. You're living in a 20-plus room mansion. You have your own private jet. You have a limousine to take you around and ride in style wherever you want to go. You have your horse stables, your gold and platinum records on the wall, and women adore you. The most beautiful women on earth scream your name in sheer delight. And you have more money than most of us will ever have combined, and you're miserable. A lot of folks would love to trade places with you. You don't mean that. You don't mean that. I preached this Sunday morning. I went to visit this couple that had been there that Sunday morning. I went on Tuesday night to see them and say, "Thanks for coming to services. Hope you'll come back." When I got there, they were so excited to see me. They said, "Come on in, preacher. Come on in here. We had not been to church in 17 years, and the first Sunday we go back, you preached on Elvis." That was amazing to us. Well, it was amazing to me too, because I didn't think I'd preached on Elvis. I told one thing about him as it related to 1 Timothy 6. Now, I said, "Why is that so amazing to you?" She said, "Oh, because Gene here, his mother and Elvis's mother were sisters. Gene's Elvis's first cousin." And I'm going to be honest with you. There are people in the congregation where I used to preach who were dead. One man in particular was dead serious. He told me, "Elvis ain't dead. He's undercover working for the FBI." And he was serious. I thought I'd run into a couple of Looney Tunes that didn't know anything about reality. And then they pull out the photo albums. Here we are living at Graceland. That's really them, and that's really Elvis. Here we are on the set of this movie. That's really them, that's really Elvis. Whoa. And he says, "You took me down memory lane, preacher, Sunday morning when you mentioned that interview." He said, "I was living at the mansion at the time, and I was in the room when that interview was conducted." He said, "Let me tell you some things that the reporter probably didn't tell you." Oh, I know he showed in his article that he thought it was amazing that someone as famous and rich as Elvis could claim to be miserable, but he says, you don't know the half of it. And he told me about the incredulity of this man. You can't mean that. You can't mean that. When are we ever going to get the memo, friend? When are we going to get the memo that this life is not about getting more and more stuff? I'll close with this invitation. The last two things I'll cover by way of invitation. Where am I going and how do I get there? God gave us a GPS. Someone said your directions to heaven, turn right and stay straight. Pretty good advice. You turn the right way and then you stay on that straight and narrow path. You follow the gospel plan of salvation, GPS. Here's your GPS. Follow the gospel plan of salvation and you'll know that there's a place waiting for you that's heavenly. And it's not, I don't want to go to hell. That's a terrible, awful place and it never ends. Matthew 25:46 calls it everlasting punishment. I want to go to heaven and I want to go there and I want you to go with me. And that's why this gospel meeting's been scheduled by your elders. They want you to go. They want everyone to go. And the way to go is to hear and believe and repent, confess and be baptized for the remission of sins as initial steps to salvation. I didn't throw those out just from my own wisdom. Those come from the book of Acts and I'd say check me out on it. But if you've already done those things, you need to live for God and realize that it's not about just doing 5 steps and saying, okay, I'm done. No. You do those things and then you keep on keeping on. You keep on being steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, 1 Corinthians 15:58. Now, I don't know when your judgment day's coming. When my judgment day is coming. You see, if I die before the day of judgment, my eternal fate is sealed. I'm not going to change it after my death. It's over and done with. Hear me. If you die ready, then great. You'll be ready when the trumpet sounds and you're raised incorruptible. If you die unprepared to meet God, you won't have time to make preparations between your death and the time of the second coming. You'll be where you're going to be. Eventually, you'll be in a place of torment that eventually will be Gehenna hell. You don't want to go there. There's not enough earthly pleasure in this world to make it worth going to hell forever. There's not enough. And so I want to go to heaven. I can go there. I just need to realize that the God who made me has given me a purpose. It is to Ecclesiastes 12:13. Fear God, keep His commandments. That's what I'm doing here. That's the whole of man. Why? So that I can live with God. That's where I'm going. How do I get there? By following the gospel given by God. I can go there and live with Him forevermore. I know what time it is and you've been very patient, but may I say lovingly and firmly at the same time, the time most that it might be for you, if you're lost, is the time to respond to the invitation. The song is about to be sung. The chance is about to be given. It could be your last. I don't know, and neither do you. You say, preachers say that all the time. Yeah, they do. And one of these days, a preacher's going to say it, and it's just going to so happen to be right, because that will be the day the Lord chooses to come. The preacher will not have known that in advance. No one knows. But one of these days, as big and wide as this world is, there's going to be a preacher talking about how the second coming could happen before this night is through or before this day is through. And someday, I don't know when, but someday there's going to be a preacher give that warning, and he is going to be right. Will you be? If so, then marvelous. I'm not trying to get you to respond if you don't need to, just for numbers' sake. We had so many responses at the meeting. Well, if they're genuine responses, fantastic. But I'm not trying to manipulate you down the aisle. But I am trying to persuade you down the aisle. If you're lost and headed for a devil's hell, I'm not going to apologize for that. And nor will I apologize for just a few extra minutes of pleading in a concentrated effort like a gospel meeting. Because I can promise you this. Someday when you get to where you're going, time won't matter to you. Hear me? Time won't matter. So it's good to take some time now to make sure of your salvation and to get right and to do it without delay. Maybe you already became a Christian, but you're not acting like it. I don't know. I'm not accusing. I'm just saying if that is the case, God wants you back. He loves you. He's not written you off. He hasn't said forget you. He wants you. He wants you to come back to Him as much as the prodigal's father wanted him to come back. And it's your chance, your opportunity, your hour. And the moment the song begins to sound, why not take care of business and quit worrying every night when you go to bed that this could be the night you die or the night He comes back. That's no way to live. Live in joy and peace and knowledge that you're ready to meet God because you're doing the best you can to follow His will, and His grace will forgive you. We love you. We want you to be saved. If you're not, we want you to get saved or get back in the saved state if you're once again lost. Won't you do what you need to do as the song begins? Won't you begin to walk down this aisle if that's what you need? As together we stand and sing, please come to Jesus.